Welcome back to another episode of Cold-Blooded Serial. I am your host and true crime bestie, Tika. Today, we're concluding the episode on the Chameleon. If you haven't listened to the last episode, please go back and listen to part 1 so you know what's going on. Okay, where we last left off, it was October 1997. And Frédéric had just received a picture via fax of the missing Texan teen, Nicholas Barclay. After contacting the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, or NCMEC, in the United States, the FBI and U.S. Embassy were quickly contacted, as well as Nicholas Barclay's family. The day after speaking with the NCMEC, Frédéric intercepted a package from them that was addressed to the name he gave them. He ripped open the envelope, and inside was a clear copy of Nicholas Barclay's missing person flyer. It showed a color picture of a young boy with blue eyes and blonde hair. The flyer listed several identifying features, including a cross tattooed between Nicholas's right index finger and his thumb. Frédéric stared at the picture and said to himself, "I'm dead," because Frédéric didn't have the same tattoo, and his eyes and hair were both dark brown. To cover his tracks, he burned the flyer in the shelter's courtyard, then went into the bathroom and bleached his hair. Lastly, he had a friend give him a makeshift tattoo resembling the same cross tattoo that Nicholas Barclay had. Yeah, that is scary. And friends, somehow Frédéric managed to convince them all that he was indeed Nicholas in a phone call. A few days later, Nicholas's older sister, 31-year-old Carrie Gibson, arrived to the airport in Spain to pick her younger brother up. However, Freddie couldn't change his eye color, but being the slickster that he is, he told Nicholas's sister that he was kidnapped by a child exploitation ring that had changed his eye color. He had lost his Texas accent. So, of course, she's like, "Well, what happened to your accent?" He told her that he had lost his Texan accent because for more than 3 years of captivity, he had been forbidden to speak English. He had escaped from a locked room in a house in Spain where a guard carelessly left the door open. Friends, Nicholas's sister, Carrie, believed him. "I'm sorry, 3 years of not speaking a language that you've been speaking almost since birth, like whenever babies learn to start talking, from 13 to 16, you're not going to forget how to speak that language. And I don't think that you would lose your accent and then pick up another accent. It doesn't make sense. But also, she's desperate and she's mourning, so I sympathize with her." Carrie Gibson, Nicholas's sister, believed him, and she tells her family that she is definitely with Nicholas. And within days, they were on a flight back to Texas. Frédéric has no heart, because I'm sure that she was probably crying and hugging him. And to tell the sister who loves her brother so much this awful lie, and then to continue with it, to get on that plane with her from one country to another, you're in deep, but you're also completely heartless. So, they get to Texas. And remember, Nicholas had blue eyes and blonde hair. Freddie, the 23-year-old Frenchman, has brown eyes, blonde hair now because he dyed it, and a thick French accent. There is no way that he's going to be able to fool the mom, right? Like, come on. A mom knows her kid. There's no way that this man is going to come in here and deceive this mother. She's going to see him immediately and be like, "No, that's not my kid." Neither the American nor the Spanish officials raised any questions once Carrie vouched for Frédéric or Nicholas. The authorities are like, hey, Nicholas had only been gone for 3 years. So she has to know who this person is. If she's saying that that's her brother, she's 31 years old. She was in her late 20s when he went missing. She knows that this person is her brother. And the FBI was not suspicious of anyone claiming to be a missing child because it's never happened before. So Frédéric was immediately granted a U.S. passport. And the next day, he was on a flight to San Antonio, Texas. I'm sure that back then, they probably thought America was exactly what you see on the movies. Like, everyone's living large. There's no poverty. He's probably like, oh my God, like, life is about to be so great. Well, when the wheels of the plane touch down, the entire family arrives to greet Nicholas and Carrie on October 18th, 1997. Everyone gave them a warm welcome. Everyone except for Beverly, Nicholas's mom, who was suspicious at first. But even she eventually came around. Frédéric lived with Carrie, her husband, and their children. Now as Nicholas. He's living as Nicholas, okay? And he quickly realized that the family he chose to live with were not living the American dream. He had to adjust to life in a cramped trailer while he continued to research how to become the best version of Nicholas Barclay. Everyone was convinced, despite a lingering French accent and the suspicious brown eyes. Frédéric knew that if he were to continue to fool his new family, he had to learn everything about Nicholas. So, he began to seek information, secretly rummaging through drawers and picture albums and watching home videos. When Frédéric discovered a detail about Nicholas's past from one family member, he would repeat it to another member. Now, the family definitely believed he was Nicholas, because how else would he know this information? Beverly, Nicholas's mom, noticed that Frédéric knelt in front of the TV just as Nicholas had. Various members of the family said that when Frédéric seemed more standoffish than Nicholas or spoke with a strange accent, they assumed that it was because of the terrible treatment that he said he had suffered. As Frédéric continued in his new identity, he realized some uncanny similarities between himself and Nicholas. Nicholas had been reported missing on June 13th, which is Frédéric Bourdin's birthday. Both of them came from poor, broken families. Nicholas had almost no relationship with his father, who, for a long time, didn't know that Nicholas was his son. Nicholas was a sweet, lonely, combustible kid who craved attention and was often in trouble at school. He had been caught stealing a pair of sneakers, and his mother had planned to put him in a youth home. According to Beverly, Frédéric quickly blended in. He was enrolled in, friends, oh my God, he was enrolled in high school. And he did his homework every night. Friends, life is going good for Frédéric. Although he hates living in a trailer, he finally has the love and acceptance that he's always wanted. However, just a mere 5 months as Nicholas Barclay was all it took for things to fall apart. How is probably what you're wondering, right? Well, Frédéric didn't do anything wrong. Besides impersonating a missing child, things hit the fan on November 1st when the TV show Hard Copy hired Charlie Parker, a private investigator out of San Antonio, Texas, to investigate the kidnapping and supposed rescue of Nicholas Barclay. This PI, Charlie Parker, went to Carrie's residence to interview Frédéric. Frédéric was happy to talk, but the PI, Charlie Parker, couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He looked at a childhood picture of Nicholas and noticed that the Nicholas in the picture had completely different ears than the young man who sat in front of him. Charlie Parker knew that ears were an identifying trait. And friends, Nicholas had really smooth earlobes, While Frédéric didn't quite have cauliflower ears, but they weren't smooth. The PI called Beverly, Nicholas's mom, and explained about the ears and the eyes and the accent, but the family was upset at his accusations. Like, how dare you tell me that my son isn't my son? I'm his mother. Don't you think I would know? You think I just have some random man pretending to be my son and I don't know that that's really my son? Like, you think so little of me? They didn't believe him. And they were like, you're just crazy and just trying to take away the little joy that we are now feeling, that we haven't felt in 3 years. We have our Nicholas back. And friends, that right there is extremely sad because they just want their loved one back. And I'm sure there's something in the bottom of the mom's gut that's telling her Frédéric is not her son. But like I said, she's desperate, she's grieving, and she misses her baby boy. So let's be sympathetic with Beverly. So, a few days later, Frédéric called the private investigator, Charlie Parker, and he asked him, he's like, who do you think you are? And when Charlie replied that he didn't believe he was Nicholas, Frédéric answered, immigration thinks it's me. The family thinks it's me. Charlie Parker wondered if he should drop the case. After all, he had told the authorities he was no longer under contract, and he figured that a mother would know her own son. Shortly before Christmas, still in 1997, Frédéric Bourdin went into the bathroom, looked at himself in the mirror, grabbed a razor, and began to mutilate his face. He was put in the psychiatric ward for several days of observation. After contacting the FBI, Charlie Parker was able to get the assistance of Nancy Fisher, a veteran FBI agent who tried to persuade Beverly and Frédéric to give blood samples for a DNA test. Both refused, and Beverly once again said, "How dare you say he's not my son?" By this point, I'm pretty sure that Beverly must sense that this random man is really not her son because the way she acted when she first saw him when he got off the plane, then the private investigator pretty much telling you, hey, like the ears are different. People's ears don't change. And then the FBI agent saying, hey, take a blood test. So, in the middle of February 1998, 4 months after Frédéric Bourdin arrived in the United States, Nancy Fisher, a veteran FBI agent, obtained warrants to force Beverly and Frédéric to cooperate. They took fingerprints from Frédéric and quickly concluded that he was not Nicholas Barclay. On March 5th, 1998, with the authorities closing in on Frédéric, Beverly called the private investigator, Charlie Parker, and told him that she finally believed her son was an imposter. The next morning, on March 6, 1998, Charlie Parker took Frédéric to a diner. The two of them ordered pancakes. And after nearly 5 months of pretending to be Nicholas Barclay, Frédéric Bourdin confessed to who he was after Charlie told him that he had upset his mother. Frédéric blurted out, "She's not my mother and you know it." Naturally, the PI is like, well, are you going to tell me who you are or not? And the young man in front of him with the blonde hair, dark roots, French accent, and 5 o'clock shadow answers, "I'm Frédéric Bourdin and I'm wanted by Interpol." The game was over. Frédéric Bourdin had been caught. Once in custody, he told the authorities that Beverly and Jason may have been complicit in Nicholas's disappearance, and that they had known from the beginning that Frédéric was lying. Frédéric said, "I'm a good imposter, but I'm not that good." And of course, they wouldn't just take his word for it. He's a pathological liar. But they did do some digging. And if you remember from the previous episode, Beverly and her eldest son were arguing a lot after Nicholas's disappearance. No evidence could be found to back up Jason's claim of Nicholas breaking into their house. and the FBI agents gathered more evidence suggesting that Beverly's home was prone to violence. She was a functioning heroin addict with a short temper. School officials previously expressed concerns that Nicholas might be an abused child due to bruises on his body, and just before his disappearance, the officials had alerted Child Protective Services. The FBI called both Beverly and Nicholas's older brother Jason in for a polygraph. Beverly passed at first, but then failed like crazy when there were no drugs in her system. Jason was just very short in his responses and came across as guilty despite passing the test. Days later, the private investigator Charlie Parker confronts Jason and tells him that he believed he killed Nicholas on accident. Jason doesn't respond. However, several weeks later, Charlie runs into Beverly and she tells him that Jason, who had been clean for over a year, had overdosed on cocaine. Since the loss of both of her sons, Beverly had completely stopped doing drugs. Charlie asked her how she could have believed for nearly 5 months that a 23-year-old Frenchman with dyed hair, brown eyes, and a European accent was her son. And she answered, "We just kept making excuses, that he's different because of all this ugly stuff that had happened." She and her daughter Carrie wanted it to be Nicholas so badly. It was only after he came to live with her that she had doubts. "He just didn't act like my son," Beverly said. "I couldn't bond with him. I just didn't have that feeling. My heart went out for him, but not like a mother's would. The kid's a mess, and it's sad, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody." Friends, he told Nicholas's family that he was sexually assaulted numerous times per week when he was kidnapped off the streets of San Antonio and picked up by military men who were American, Mexican, and European. He said that these men had dozens of children who they abused and tortured. And when the FBI and Nicholas's family heard this and saw the burn marks on him, they couldn't help but to feel sorry for him and believe him. On September 9th, 1998, Frédéric Bourdin stood in a San Antonio courtroom and pleaded guilty to perjury and to obtaining and possessing false documents. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison for passport fraud and perjury before being sent back to France in October 2003 and continued impersonating teens, but was quickly caught. Then, on August 8th, 2007, after a year of dating a French woman named Isabelle, he got married and had their first of 5 children, a daughter who they named Athena. When the interviewer, David Gran from The New Yorker, asked if he had become a new person, Frédéric fell silent and then said, "No, this is who I am." And friends, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen to my true crime stories. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow Cold-Blooded Serial, a true crime podcast, so you don't miss what's coming next. Bye.